and there was cerebral fluid and blood dripping into a bag out of his head in the NICU for a few days. Hey everyone, it's Rashni of glamazini.com, bringing you light and laughter per usual. And I am back with another video. Today I'm going to be talking to my special needs moms, or just my moms, or just anybody who is kind of curious about my business. I had this realization that I have told you guys a lot of stuff about my son and his diagnosis, etc., especially on YouTube. Links to all of the things about that are in the atmosphere or in the video information box, but I never told you guys about his surgeries. So if you are unaware, I currently have a 6-year-old, going to be 7-year-old in June, little boy who is the cutest thing you have ever seen in your life. Fight me if you don't believe me, who was born with Spina Bifida, hydrocephalus, and a Chiari-2 malformation. It's a lot, but all is well. God is able. When he was born, he had to have major surgeries out the gate. So I just decided to make you guys a quick video about all of his surgeries, because I feel like it'll be helpful not only to understand if you're a mom or anyone who does not deal with people who have disabilities or special needs or who were born with birth defects, but also to encourage the moms who know what this is like to know that, girl, you ain't alone. Girl, I'm out here too. Girl. When you are born with spina bifida, it is a defect of the lower part of your spine development. If you think of the spine developing like a zipper, it closes down like that while the fetus is in your stomach. Spina bifida, it doesn't close all the way. So there's some opening on the end. FYI, the Chiari-2 malformation is when the top doesn't close properly. So the zipper is kind of closed in the middle, but not on the end. So typically people who are born with spina bifida, the defect is in the lower portion of their back. Depending on how the defect presents itself, it can oftentimes be a fluid-filled sac of skin. Sometimes that fluid which is cerebral fluid, brain fluid. Cerebral fluid goes up and down your spine into your brain in a cycle. Okay, that's how that works. And your spine is a protective casing of bone for those nerves that go down inside. There are different levels to spina bifida. I've done videos about this. I'll see if I can find them and insert it in here, or I'll put links if I don't insert them. But the one that my son has is the worst presentation. It is called myelomeningocele. I don't remember all of them. I know there's occulta, I know there's meningocele. I don't remember if there's other one. The nicer, cleaner one, there's just a sac that fills with fluid kind of poking out the person's back, right? And then the sac could also have nerves that grew inside of it, so that could affect some of how their lower limbs and lower extremities function. And then on the worser case, is worser a word? On the worst cases, their back could just be open. Open in a small opening, open with a small lesion, or open with a larger lesion. So just to know, my son had the second worst case of spina bifida lesion that his neurosurgeon had seen. Yeah, the second worst. So he didn't have a cute little sac, he didn't have extra skin, he didn't have any of that. The whole bottom of his back was wide open, you guys. And it was horrifying. I have a picture. I'm not going to show you guys that picture. It took me a long time to even be able to look at that picture. And honestly, I was really mad at my father-in-law when he took that picture, but I'm happy he took it now. Anyway, so all of that to say, the day after my son was born, he had to have his back closed, right? Because you can't walk around the earth, or, well, he couldn't walk, but you can't be around the earth with your back wide open. That's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. Okay, so the day after he was born, surgery 1 was his lesion closure for spina bifida. And that is typically the first surgery that spina bifida, children with spina bifida will have. That surgery went well. However, we were left with an open wound that was wet set. So they basically like brought the skin together as much as they could, but they couldn't just close it up. It wasn't that pretty, you guys. So even though we were in the NICU for 5 weeks and then we went home, it took 4 months for his back lesion wound to fully close up. And we had to stay really locked into the wound care team at our local children's hospital because it was trying not to close, but thank God it's closed. Also, I have weekly pictures of that as well, but I'm not going to share them with you guys. Pro tip for the special needs moms, I kept those pictures of his wound with me because I didn't want to have to keep opening his wound up and taking all the dressings off for like any old body. So only his neurosurgeon and like, that's it really, his neurosurgeon might be the one to see his back wide open, besides us when we were changing his wound and his dressing, and maybe his pediatrician. I think I showed her a few times. Everybody else got to see weekly photographs. Because when you pull those dressings off, you're messing with how the wound heals. And anyway, pro tip, okay? Second surgery, once you close up the back of a child with spina bifida, now that that closure has happened, there is a chance that the cerebral fluid is like, where do I go? In a person that has normal development, it knows what to do. But in a person that has a defect in their development, like spina bifida at the bottom, sometimes that fluid will be too abundant. And so it'll start pooling up in their brain, hence hydrocephalus. So after you close a person's wounds with spina bifida, you wait a day or two or whatever you do, and you see if they have hydrocephalus, and yay, we won the hydrocephalus lottery. I'm joking. Okay, so yes, we ended up finding out that my son had hydrocephalus, and long story short, the next thing they have to do is they have to place a shunt. A shunt is basically a tube and a drain that goes into a person's brain. There's a drain, and then it drains the cerebral fluid back into your body, and it just goes into your abdomen, and then your body just processes it like nothing. It does nothing with it. It just processes it out and you pee it out or whatever. And that is how you keep hydrocephalus from getting out of control. If hydrocephalus gets out of control, you can have brain damage. The person's head gets really large. You've probably seen, well, you can Google pictures and you can type in hydrocephalus, and it can get pretty sad and heartbreaking and out of control. So shunt was the next surgery. I think it was 4 days after he was born. We put a shunt in, and it was in the back. And then you guys, I don't remember all the times and dates. I wish I had written all this stuff down, but at the time I was in full absolute shock about what had happened to me. I had a C-section that I did not want. I had all this medical stuff going on with my child. I was swollen up like a puffer fish, and I couldn't walk, so I was in a wheelchair. So I really wasn't all about trying to write down dates, just being honest. So anyway, I think about 4 days later, we did the first ventricular shunt. And then a few days later, that shunt failed. When a shunt fails, it means that the ventricles, the spaces in your brain, they're not getting smaller. The fluid is not draining out enough. And the shunt somehow got clogged. The pipes got clogged, okay? So they had to take that shunt out. They had to put a actual drain, externalized drain at the top of my son's head. And there was cerebral fluid and blood dripping into a bag out of his head in the NICU for a few days, because they had to make sure that it wasn't infected. Needless to say, that was probably the worst day we had in the NICU. I remember sitting in the NICU next to the isolette with my son with cerebral fluid and blood dripping into a bag, and listening to the beep, 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 and real talk, honestly thinking I was gonna lose my mind. I didn't. That could actually be debated, but I didn't. So a few days later, after they tested the fluid coming out of his head and they determined that there was no infection, we had our second ventricular shunt placed. So what is that like? That's surgery number 4. Lesion closure, shunt externalization, second shunt. The second shunt was placed up here, to our chagrin, because his head was like this big and the shunt was like this big. So it was, and they had to shave it off, and then plus he was bald in the back and had a scar back here. So it was a lot, you guys. It was a lot. But anyway, that happened, and that was the 4th surgery. We also had a subclavian IV put in, which is just like a permanent, semi-permanent thing that they put right here in your chest. So he also did have that. And so he still also has a scar from that. It's kind of like 4.5 surgeries. It was like a little, they had to put something in. So that was there. There's a scar there. There's also 2 scars on my son's stomach, because when they do the shunt, they have to cut you on the abdomen to pull the tubing down. So 1 shunt, 1 scar. Shunt 2, 2 scars. So once my son left the NICU 5 weeks after he was born, he had 4.5 surgeries. I'll say 4.5 surgeries. And a myriad of tests. I don't even remember all the tests, CAT scans, all the things. I don't remember. After that, we had 2 more surgeries and 1 more surgery scare. So one of the surgeries was because my son was born with spina bifida, like I said, and he did not have movement of his lower limbs. Well, one of his legs does move, and he's honestly just at 6 years old starting to learn how to like do something with it. Like he can just pull it up and down, and he calls it the kicker, because I'm silly and I call it the kicker. And then he kicks me, he'll be like, ah! anyway, but back then there was no movement, and he also had like a club foot. It was turning in. So we had serial casting, which is they put basically a cast on your baby's leg, and they put it on. It moves your leg a little bit. They take it off. They move it again. They move it. So they're positioning, kind of like how braces work on your teeth. So if you're ever out in the world and you see a baby with a cast on their leg, it might not be just because they broke their leg. It might be because their orthopedic surgeon is trying to correct club foot or something of that nature, or some dysplasia or something like that, right? So be kind, because I know people who had people be really mean to them because they thought that their kid's leg was broken, and I even got some snarly looks, and I'm like, listen, I'm going through enough. Okay, I don't need you in my face right now. So we had surgery right before the serial casting. In what was called a tendon release. They basically went into the back, like right here, and cut open and like released the muscle or something like that. Girl, I don't know, something like that, right? Orthopedic surgeon went and did that, and then serial cast, boop, 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 so that his feet were not, because his feet used to turn like this, and now his feet are how they should be, right? So that was the next surgery. Following that, we had a scare where the shunt that they had put in was seeming like it was malfunctioning. He was having some symptoms. He was having a lot of sensory problems. He was having a lot of things happening. And his head was getting bigger, and I was afraid, because like I told you, that can cause a lot of problems. That can cause brain damage. It can cause a lot of problems. So we went to the hospital. We were scheduled for surgery. My son was in his little gown and everything, and the neurosurgeon came in, told us he looked at the scans, and he decided, maybe we should wait. Maybe we should wait. And listen, before he even finished the sentence, we were gone. You ever see those cartoons where it's just like that little spinning thing of dust, and it's like, pew! We were out of there, okay? Because all I heard was, you don't have to cut my son's head open on today, okay? And I was like, sir, you don't have to tell me that twice. And then in 2014, we had my son's last surgery. So yes, you guys, all of these things, 6.5, 7 surgeries, but I lost count, happened in a 2-year span of time. December of 2014, we had what was at the time an experimental surgery, but they have totally, they're doing a lot better with it now, and I see a lot more people having it. But at the time, an experimental surgery called an ETV. I don't remember what it stands for. Something like I don't remember. Ventricular. Listen, I'll put it on the screen. But basically what it means is, it's something that you do in place of having a physical shunt in your head. They go into the person's brain, they open up where the cerebral fluid should be flowing, and they see if they do whatever they do in there, and then they see if it'll flow on its own. And for some people it works, and for some people it doesn't. So if it doesn't work, then you have to go back to using the mechanical shunt. But if it does work, then you don't need a shunt anymore. So we decided, why not try it? I mean, it can't hurt, right? If we try it and it fails for my son, then we know that we just have to rely on shunts. Well, you guys, 2014 was the last time that my son relied on his shunt. The ETV absolutely worked. The ventricular size of his ventricles, started to go down. The fluid in his brain stopped pooling as much. Now, his ventricle size will probably always be bigger than most because he was born with hydrocephalus, and that's kind of what happens. But that was the last surgery that my son had. So, to recap, we closed his spina bifida lesion the day after he was born. A few days later, we put a ventricular shunt. Then a few days later, we had shunt failure and we had to externalize that shunt. Then a few days later, after we determined that it was not infected in any way, we put another ventricular shunt. We also had to put a subclavian IV in there. Soon after getting out of the hospital, we had a tendon release from the orthopedic department and serial casting. Probably a few months later, a year later, I don't know, we had a scare where we were ready to have another ventricular shunt revision, but we were told we didn't have to have that. And in December of 2014, we had his last surgery, which was an ETV. Now, it is April of 2019, and my son is 6. And I unfortunately understand from being part of different support groups online that he might not be entirely out of the water. Children that have these types of diagnosis do oftentimes end up having to have a lot of other surgeries in their life, but we have not had any now. But there are things that could come up. There are things that could come up with respect to his spine health. There are things that could come up once again with shunts and ventricular fluid buildup, hydrocephalus. We always have to maintain that, so we always have to pay attention to how he's doing there. There are things that have to do with what they call tethered cord, which means as the child grows, the scar tissue at the base of the back can start pulling on things that aren't supposed to be getting pulled on, like nerves. There are things that have to do with like bowel and bladder management, because once again, if nerves start getting pulled on, things that were working might not be working, things that work, right? Like your legs might stop working when they were working before, and this might stop, your good might stop working, and it was working for all that. So we are not having to do any of that stuff right now, but it is a possibility in the future. I am sure that after hearing all of this, somebody is going to be in the comments like, girl, what? Girl, what? Leave your questions down below and I will do my best to answer it in some form. I do offer life coaching again, you guys. So if you are interested in working with me as your life coach, please go to glamazini.com and click on the Work With Me tab. I look forward to talking to you. Also, if you'd like to support me, you can always go to patreon.com/glamazini and become a patron. We have a lot of fun in the Patreon group and you have one-on-one access to me. So check that out and I will see you in the next video. Until the next video, be well, be encouraged, you guys. Bye.